Well, let's see then. Everything working? I'm only seeing black screens. There we go. We have the visual. So as I said like 2 weeks ago, when I played Kingdom Hearts 2, might have been last week actually. Time is a funny thing. I wanted to do the same thing with Kingdom Hearts 1, because in a lot of ways I think the combat pace of my game is a lot closer to 1 than it is to 2. It's actually, funnily enough, of all things, my combat is probably the most similar to Birth by Sleep out of the entire series, in a lot of ways. But I do think that 1 in the main 3 games is the one that gets the closest to what I have got going on for myself here. So I wanted to see maybe there's something that is significantly different about the bosses in Kingdom Hearts 1 compared to 2, which we did a couple of the optional super bosses, and we're only going to be doing super bosses here today. I might do the final boss as well, depending, because there's not as many interesting super bosses in Kingdom Hearts 1. And I think the final boss has a handful of interesting fights back to back to back. So we might figure that out first. But before we do anything else, I'm gonna give you the thumbnail fight, which is obviously Sephiroth. So I've already beaten Sephiroth, just to get a little bit into it yesterday. To make sure that I still can, even at level 100. This is in proud mode, after all. And one thing that I noticed immediately is that this fight, as it is a Kingdom Hearts 1 fight, is so much more grounded. Sephiroth doesn't fly around, he does teleport, but he stays close to the ground, because this is about as much aerial room as we get. Super gliding. This is it. Right? There's nothing more than this. So, one other thing that I noticed is that he hits like a truck. So let me actually, real quick, put up arrow. He's a little more aggressive. And we all remember Kingdom Hearts 1 Sephiroth, at least the people who played Kingdom Hearts 1 when they were younger. Kingdom Hearts 1 Sephiroth being so much more difficult than Kingdom Hearts 2 Sephiroth. And I kind of do as well, but I figured that's just a level scaling thing. This thing is actually scaled to like level 99 or level 100, whereas it's more scaled to like level 50 in Kingdom Hearts 2. But no, it's actually also an aggressiveness thing. He is much more aggressive, because he does have these moments where he just kind of like stands around and like does this walking animation, which looks kind of goofy if you're not engaging with him. But when he does that, that just means that he's ready to hit you when you get in range. Right? So his cycle there is kind of like ready to attack, and at some point he just decides to attack even if you're not close enough. But if I do get close enough, he does attack. And there is not a lot of downtime between these attacks. So what you need to do in order to actually hit him is to kind of like hit him at the tail end of his attacking animation. Because if you wait for the attack to fully be finished before attacking, you're going to be too late. And I think that is a huge part of what makes this fight more difficult. Sliding dash helps a lot, by the way. More difficult than the Kingdom Hearts 2 fight. Because in the Kingdom Hearts 2 fight, sometimes he does just kind of stand around and let you hit him. Because that's what video game bosses do in order for them to be manageable, right? This Sephiroth just says, no, I don't do that, that's dumb. Why would I let you hit me? And as a result, he's a pain in the ass. Also, he's got a lot of moves where he's just straight up, well, not invulnerable, but he's unstunnable. He doesn't get like stunned. That Heartless Angel attack is also a lot more tight in its timing in this fight compared to the Kingdom Hearts 2 fight. So, and now he's in his second phase, and he's like just waiting for you to be attackable. It kind of remains the same. He just walks faster. He just runs. He has a different animation, different walk speed. But aside from that, the thing is more or less the same. He also seems to teleport a lot more. And the teleports might be a little tighter in timing than Kingdom Hearts 2. I don't think they are. In this case, you can actually see that, okay, best way to get through this is just dodge roll and heal and leave braces your way through. Alright, and that's his third phase, at which point he just starts spawning those orbs, which, honestly, that is the biggest difference. His attack base goes up even more, which is insane because he's already got such a high rate of attack, right? As we discussed previously. But now he just, I think he literally might not have any, like, downtime at all between attacks. The only downtime he has is when he does that, like, running around, which in and of itself is part of an attack, right? Because what that actually does is it primes him to, like, swing. But for the most part, I think this last phase, the difficulty comes from those orbs that spawn in. His actual attacks are just the same attacks with different animations. With slightly... Okay, you can go fuck yourself for doing that twice in a row. 3 times in a row, are you? Fuck off. So as you can see, the third phase actually isn't that bad. His animations get more, like, intimidating. Things just get generally faster, but because the pace of the fight from the start is already so high, that doesn't actually impact that much, I don't think. So, I do think that what I learned there is that I've been thinking that in my AI, what they do is they do an attack and then they have a delay where they just wait to move on to whatever is the next state that they go into before the ability task is actually considered finished. We've kind of got two things going on there, right? We have a signal that the ability is finished, and then we have the actual transition out of the state that is executing that ability. In my case, I just have a little number in there that lets me say, okay, so after you finish your ability, wait this amount more time before exiting the state. And effectively, Sephiroth has a very small number there. If we were to, like, port that over to, like, a similar system, I'm sure that his AI works differently from how I have things set up, but the same basic principle counts. And this is the super boss of the super bosses, right? You could argue that the Xemnas fight in this game is more difficult, I guess. But that's mostly because his abilities are more tricky, I think. I think his actual AI isn't as aggressive. We'll see that in a moment. I'm going to fight Xemnas as well, obviously. But what I learned there is that this amount of almost having no time between abilities being executed is not okay for a normal, like, story boss, right? This is too difficult. So maybe I can tone it down a little bit in those delays, because they might be a little too long in my game right now. But I also need to be mindful to not lower them too much, because that creates this hyper aggressive AI. It also could be an interesting variable, right? Because as the fight progresses, going from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3, those numbers can lower, so that he does do more attacks more quickly after each other. I think that's interesting. I also don't have a distinct, like, phase system in my boss at the moment. He gets new abilities that he unlocks at certain HP thresholds. But maybe what I should do is just have 2 or 3 entirely different state trees for each phase. So that way I can actually program the phases to work differently, instead of just having a couple of numbers be slightly tweaked. That would also make it easier to tweak those numbers, because right now I have to really weirdly hook this up to like parameters and that kind of stuff, which is not very intuitive. If I have just a couple of different state tree assets and the main state tree just picks the one sorry, my throat is killing me. Main state tree just picks the one at the HP value that it's currently at. That lets me do a couple of things. That lets me also potentially do things like having abilities that trigger when going from phase to phase. Like Sephiroth right there had an ability going from phase 2 to 3 where he does like the meteor attack, and you'll be able to like more regularly do that during phase 3 as well, I think, or phase 2. I think it's only in phase 3. If you give him the opportunity to. Obviously we killed him before that could happen, but having something where you can just say, okay, we're moving from phase 2 to 3, so first do this ability and then move into the next state tree that executes the code for phase 3. Just hard code saying at this amount of HP you do this ability. I think that would be good as well. So fundamentally, I think I have to program my bosses differently from how I do it right now. Do I have a writer open? I do. I don't know if it's a great idea to open Unreal as well as play Kingdom Hearts at the same time, but let's take a peek at Unreal and see if it doesn't impact the frame rate in Kingdom Hearts. It probably does. I mean, it's a PlayStation 2 game, right? It's running in 4K, but it's a PlayStation 2 game. At the end of the day, it surely can handle having Unreal run in the background on a like non-heavy scene as well. Not going to open the actual main persistent level of the game, because that does take a lot of resources for my PC, but just having my test level open probably shouldn't hinder Kingdom Hearts too much. I just want to show you how the state tree for the boss fights that I have right now work, because they're a little iffy with the way I have them set up. Because effectively what I've been doing is I've just been programming them like normal enemies, and I talked about this in the previous stream. I think I did for the research. As my enemies have been getting more complex with more different abilities, because the enemies were very boring and stale, and I've been adding more abilities and more intelligence to those enemies, they've been getting closer to the way that the boss fights feel. But that means that the boss fights now need to have some extra headroom over the normal enemies. And I think fundamentally I need to have that different like phase-based approach, because it lets me script out certain things a little bit more. As well as just the abilities need to be more grand. There need to be a little bit more like cinematic flair to certain things in boss fights and that kind of thing. Needs to be more difficult, all that kind of stuff. But I think fundamentally I need to approach coding them differently. And I'll show you what I mean with that right now. So if we just take a random this guy. This is a good example of a normal enemy that I have, right? Which is more or less finished with the amount of abilities that he has. At least for the time being. So if I open a state tree, what we have is we have an inactive state and an active state. When he is active, he can be passive, where he just waits. It's just a subtree where he finds a location, he moves to that, and he waits. And he repeats that until he gets pulled out of that subtree. And then when he wants to attack the player, he's got a couple of different things that he can do. He can do a teleport attack. He can do just hitting the player physically. And if he chooses to hit the player physically, he can either chase the player. Well, he always chases the player, I should say. And then he can choose whether to steal from the player which is one of his abilities. He can steal HP or MP from the player, at which point he goes into this steal stats like substate here, which has steal HP or steal MP, picks one at random. It does the ability where it steals it, and then it tries to get away from the player, right? So when we enter this state, it actually goes into this state, and then it goes into one of these states, and it remains there until this ability ends. And that ability ends when the player actually catches back up to the enemy and hits them. And while that is happening, it constantly fleeing. Again, this is why I like state trees, because it's very easy to do these kind of things in parallel, right? This is waiting to enter state, and while that's all happening, everything under it still is running. So you can have it wait on one thing and do something else. Behavior trees, it's a little bit more annoying to do. So this is a pretty normal, just state tree for a enemy AI, right? Now, if I go into one of the bosses, the boss that I've been trying to improve, you'll see that it's a little more built out, but essentially it still is the same thing. It's got a root. It doesn't have an inactive state because it's always going to be active, but we have a aggressive state and we have a fleeing state. In the aggressive state, we have close attacks and distance attacks, and then both of those can also actually choose to do a special attack, which it will take from this. And then if we are, and this is where we get into the slight difference, for the firewall, the Angel of Death abilities, those both, when we are under a certain amount of HP, it does two abilities, right? So if I am over 25% HP, it just does the firewall ability. So task does one ability, but if we are under 25% HP, it does two tasks that run an ability. Voice cracks are going to be a thing today. Again, my throat is killing me. I don't know, kind of lose my voice, which is not good. As somebody who uses their voice a lot. I need to drink more water, that is. So this is kind of like the phase approach that I have right now, but I don't think this is great, because if I now want to make a change to the, god damn it, the delay between abilities, for instance, what I would have to do is I would have to parameterize this delay after ability for this specific thing, and then it becomes either a parameter on this state or a parent state or the tree as a whole. And then I would have to dynamically change that parameter through like an evaluator or whatever. It's just a little clunky to do it that way. So what I'm thinking we should probably do instead is get rid of doing whatever we're doing here and more or less just pretend like all of this doesn't exist for the time being. If we just add a new state, I'm gonna need to clean that up anyway. If we just add a new state here as a new root, what we should probably do instead is we have a state for phase 1. That's both the Unreal documentation and the Lua backend for Kingdom Hearts. We have a state for phase 1 in which we just run a well, ideally probably what you want to do is you want to add one more child to this, and this is actually the that actually just closes out Kingdom Hearts. Okay, we'll restart that game in a moment. So we'll call this like phase 1 tree, and this will be a type of linked asset, and we'll make a different state tree altogether that just does the code for phase 1, and then we can just put phase 1 here. We can put a transition for on tick. We can even make this tick a fairly low tick rate. Just make this like tick once a second or something like that. So that it's not checking every frame, but it's probably fine to check it every frame, to be honest. And there we can check something. Float compare, I think, would be the way we do that. Do I not have... I guess that's technically a condition. No, entry condition should be the same. What is that condition called? Hold on. I have a condition here. If HP is greater than 25%. What is this? Check health. All right, so we can transition here. We could do it on event and send an event every time it takes damage or whatever. I don't really care. So condition. Check health. And we can say if that is less than or equal to 50%, this is a percentage, then we go over to phase 2. Right, and then phase 2, instead of just having a phase tree in it, that's why I have this as a substate here. We can do phase 2 entry ability. And when that is completed, we just go to the next state, and the next state will be the actual phase 2 tree. And then we have as many states as we want in this regard, right? So we can do another phase 3. Usually bosses have either 2 or 3 phases, right? Where we pretty much do the same thing. We can make it do a ability on entry to signify the fact that it's in phase 3 now. And then run an entirely different tree. Which allows me to... other way around. Which allows me to more specifically program in differences between the states, rather than just having a couple of conditions. Saying, hey, do this ability instead of this ability if you're under that amount of health, right? I can make his actual decision-making be significantly different based on which phase he is in. And that is a fundamentally different way for the AI to like think than this more like single-minded approach. So I think this is going to be the structure that I need to make these boss fights in, rather than them just being enemies with extra steps. This is what makes a boss fight partially a boss fight, I think. And the fact that Sephiroth there had such distinct, like, different phases is helping me think about that. But also, I can make these different subtrees. I could technically make them subtrees in this, but I might as well make them different assets. I could then go in here and say, well, the delay after ability, I can just make that one parameter or a couple of different parameters. And I can very easily just add them from right here after I've given it a linked asset. Because you can see the way state trees work. If I have a basic chase and attack, it has parameters that come from this subtree, right? So I can just give in these parameters, and these could just be the time between abilities or the whatever. What I even could do is something that Kinemats 2 does sometimes, and that is when it goes from a certain phase to a certain other phase. At least I think that's what's happening in Kingdom Hearts 2. It kind of sticks the HP at the exact value that it wants the character to have. So that way you don't overkill a phase, or you don't blast past a phase or whatever. When it goes from phase 2 to phase 3, it just like hard sets it to like be limited to a certain amount of HP, and then it does that entry ability and it goes into the next phase. Could even replicate that fairly easily, because whenever we just enter this state, we can just set the HP to a certain value. That's fairly easy to replicate as well. This is going to be the way that we do it. So, yeah. Anyway, let's start up Kingdom Hearts again. That's probably what I'm going to be doing this weekend, I'd say. Today I spent a lot of time on some platforming stuff for the platforming level for the dungeon. And I've actually decided that I need more platforming mechanics as well, which I can show you a little bit of. Real quick, while the loading screen happens here. I didn't want to have a double jump throughout the entirety of the game, because that breaks a lot of the level design as I have it right now, because I've made these walls all over the place a certain height that you can't jump over. If I now allow a double jump, that breaks a lot of stuff. But I figured actually I kind of need some sort of double jump. Seems like it's probably good to have. So what I've made is I've made this actor that just kind of temporarily gives you a single double jump when you enter it, when you enter the center bit. I've also added wall jumps. I'm thinking about maybe also adding a grapple. I played a hat in time today for a little bit. Oh, no, hold on. It was about to play copyrighted music. I think. Well, it's all copyrighted, but there's one specific song that always like mutes videos and stuff. I was playing a Hat in Time, and that has a very satisfying grappling mechanic. And I was thinking, well, actually, Rayman 3 also has a grappling mechanic. And I was thinking, actually, Rayman 2 has a grappling mechanic. So maybe having a basic grappling mechanic also is a good thing in my tool belt for when I'm designing levels. Right now, I'm specifically thinking about, okay, how can I make slightly more intricate platforming challenges? Yes, that go a little bit beyond that idea for like just having things be time affected, right? Because right now I have like moving platforms in a couple of different ways, and my moveset is just too limited to have fun platforming, is really what it comes down to. I need to enlarge that moveset in order to give myself more opportunities to design interesting courses to platform through. And when I do have that, I can also make this general traversal throughout the game as a whole more interesting. That did make me think again that maybe I should have some more Metroidvania elements in the game, but I don't know. Anyway, so right now I don't have DS4 Windows, but yeah, you can see I can't double jump. Well, I can input buffer jump, which is very lenient, but I can't double jump. If I go through here, I can double jump, which then allows me to chain that into a wall jump, which also gives me a double jump when I do it, because that felt like you needed a little bit of that extra control. So having the combination of that double jump enabler, the wall jumps, the dash now as well, which obviously is also a platforming mechanic as well as a combat mechanic. This already has given me so much more room to put together somewhat more interesting stuff. It doesn't need to be the best platformer ever, clearly. Also, we have the ledge grab mechanic. But it needs to be more than just like very stale, go from moving platform to moving platform, because that's kind of what it is right now. I have one mechanic where it has these like trapdoor things as well. Right when you step on them, after I think it's variable, but after a certain amount of time they collapse down, and then they go back up after another little timer, so you're like forced to immediately jump off of them. This one is very strict in how long it lets you do the thing, but yeah. Doing this with a keyboard and mouse is not ideal. But yeah, this... Obviously, it needs to have animations to it as well. And then if I had ledge grabbing enabled for that mesh, it would have grabbed the thing. So this is a decent start. I'm thinking grappling is another good mechanic to have, because being able to grapple and then chain it into one of these and then chain it into a wall jump and then whatever, I think that gives me pretty much all the tools I need. I'm considering, on top of wall jumping, also having a wall run, which again, that can chain together fairly like neatly into having a wall run, into having a double jump, into having like a grapple, into a wall jump or whatever. You can do a lot of more interesting stuff when you have these different mechanics available to you. So that's what I've been working on like a lot today. So my brain is a little fried after thinking about all that and like implementing some of it. Anyway, we have boss stuff is what I was gonna do. So we just did Sephiroth, which got me talking about the whole like setting up different phases. One thing that I also wanted to check out, I actually finished the Hades Cup just to unlock this fight because I knew I wanted to check it out. This is a boss fight that is entirely stationary, right? So I kind of wanted to see if there's anything interesting that like comes to mind here, because it's entirely stationary. He can rotate around his own axis, of course. But aside from that, he's actually kind of like a mostly projectile-based boss, and this is also an interesting, like, weird boss that requires you to block to damage him. Obviously, I don't have a block in my game, so I can't replicate that, but it's an interesting idea for a boss fight that plays differently from the normal gameplay, because you literally just cannot reach his face to deal damage to him. Until this happens, and then you can. And then you do this. Probably only do that if you have a better magic keyblade, because that was abysmal. And there we go, we're in phase 2. He starts off phase 2 always doing that, right? And then we have a new ability that he can do as well. So yeah, again, this boss fight is entirely projectile based, depending on if you want to count those spikes from the ground as projectiles. For all intents and purposes, they are. Well, I guess that's an AoE attack that he just did. But this boss fight kind of does the thing that I was talking about in a previous stream, where when you get him down to a certain phase, and that's the thing that I'm doing with my thing as well, he starts doing like 2 abilities at once. I think in his next phase he will start doing a like super freeze where he just freezes half the arena in front of him and you need to get the fuck out of, well, being in front of him. And then in his final phase, he combines that attack with the boulders from the sky with that super freeze attack. So I'm interested to like analyze a little bit and to try to figure out an answer as to why this boss fight in particular does that, and the other ones, I think for the most part, don't. Gravity shifting platforms. Yeah, gravity shifting is a bit fucky in Unreal, but I have an idea for one particular dungeon where I want... Yeah, fire doesn't work that well. Where I want the, like, upside being downside, downside being upside. Again, we're in Kingdom Hearts 1, so I can kind of show you the idea in a moment. But if you know this game... So yeah, you see he is doing two abilities at the same time as his entry to the new phase. If you're familiar with this game, you'll know Wonderland and the Bazaar Room. I kind of want to make one of my dungeons in that vibe, where it's kind of just one big room, but entering and exiting certain doors lets you go into an instance of the room that is maybe scaled differently or rotated differently or whatever. I think that's super interesting, and I think for that, having some bits be a little fucky with the gravity is probably fine. And a good idea. So I might actually do that, but that's very, very far into the future. But something like that is at least part of the plan at the moment. But yeah, custom gravity in Unreal is a little... Depending on how in-depth you want to do it, it's a bit fucky because the character movement component... Maybe when Mover becomes a new standard, it becomes a little easier. You'll still have to do a lot of like the movement math yourself at that rate, though. Maybe not, I don't know. I still haven't really looked into Mover because it's still undocumented and still, as far as I can tell, in the last year hardly been developed. Okay, there we go. Now he's going to go into his last phase. But if you do it a little bit less like Mario Galaxy, which obviously is the ultimate example of custom gravity in video games, and a little bit more like maybe like Sonic Adventure, Sonic Adventure 2 specifically has a couple of levels. Here, this is the Super Freeze ability, right? So he does this once, and then... Yeah, we're in this final phase. Abilities just start happening passively now, without him actually like doing them. Stuff just happens. And in this case, it is like fairly chaotic. You could obviously make that a little bit, oh god, a little bit less chaotic than it is right now, because he just goes from 0 to 100 real fucking fast. But yeah, the custom gravity is what I was talking about. If you do it a little bit more like Sonic Adventure 2 does in the levels in space, where the camera is a little bit more like held back, the camera doesn't move along with the custom like gravity direction and that kind of stuff, and your player inputs doesn't get like super weird and fucky due to it, because that's mostly the issue, is having good player inputs that makes sense from the camera's perspective and the character's like forward direction. Because just making a move like a tank, effectively, just having forward, backward, and then rotating around its own axis, is fairly easy to do, but that's not very like good movement for most video games. Like having this type of movement, but then also have that work up on that wall, becomes a lot more tricky, a lot more quickly than you think. I have that one video on custom gravity, and it's kind of janky as is. I guess we also have the Phantom that we could look at, but I don't have. But I do want to take a look at it at some point. But it's one of those things where if I need to rework how my entire moving code works for one little section that's going to have custom gravity, I'm probably not going to do it, because I have about a million other things to do as well. Let me actually make a save file here, because this is a fight that you can only do once. I want to have a save file for it. And we also want to do Ripple Drive. And for this, we don't actually want to have the Oblivion. I don't think Diamond Dust is necessarily what we want either, though. I think Oathkeeper is probably a good in-between. We want to have more MP because the finisher that Xemnas here is weak to, because it's gravity-based, I think, is the idea. Scales with your MP, but you also obviously don't want to go full MP if you want to physically hit him still. Let me see. I have Graviga. Let's make that Aroga and Curaga. Alright, this boss fight I haven't fought yet. Well, I have years ago, but recently. So we're gonna do this in real time. I'm not used to this fight anymore at all. But yeah, you can see he immediately just starts off with some abilities. But okay, so now he's about equally as aggressive as Sephiroth. He also just doesn't have a cooldown between abilities. Which again, very much keeping in mind that this is like a mega super boss. Also, doesn't hurt to have this. So obviously that's not a good reference point for my boss fights, unless I decide to make a super mega uber super boss. So turns out that this fight actually not that difficult. you can still kind of spam through. Oh, until you can't. So yeah, this he kind of fucks with your context menu. So remember when I said that I thought this fight wasn't as spammy with his abilities as Sephiroth? I think he's more spammy. I'm kind of finding that the difficulty for these super bosses kind of just comes down to the speed at which they attack. But that might specifically be something that's indicative of these super bosses and like not a really good thing to base your normal boss fights off, I'm afraid. You know, having a finisher that he's weak to is very nice in theory. But if you don't actually get to these finishers... Okay, maybe give it a little bit more thought. That's not what I wanted to do, but sure, we're doing strike right now. Yeah, see how quickly after he finishes one ability, he goes into the next? He doesn't really leave any openings, which also makes me think, how am I supposed to do this aside from just button mashing? And that, I guess that's kind of the other side of this. If you overdo it with the aggressiveness on the boss fight, Hate this. Okay. It just becomes, well, I might as well button mash because there's no strategy to deciding when I want to attack him. Also, okay, let's do our equipment abilities here. I guess we actually want to unequip. That's a fantastic idea that I just came up with. I think we want to unequip all of our combo pluses. Air combo plus doesn't really matter, I guess, because we're doing normal combos, but we definitely want to be unequipping those because we want to get that finisher to pop off, because that does by far the most damage. So that makes sense to me. And then while we're at it, we might as well change some things around to have our MP boosting equipment so that we have the most amount of MP possible, because again, the damage scales with the MP. Which is a disgusting amount of MP, holy hell! I literally have a bigger MP bar than an HP bar at this point, I think. Jesus Christ. Okay. Let's give that another shot. So I guess it's mostly about the preparation for this fight, not so much about in-battle strategy. You could argue that that's just cheesing the boss, to be fair. So the balance between pre-fight preparation and in-fight strategy is probably something to keep in mind. Ah, god damn it, I didn't do that. Okay, let's try again. Because now it should be a lot easier for me to land that finisher. I think, does he not have any, like, he just never staggers? Or do I need to block him in order to get him to stagger? What, is that the idea behind this fight, to learn to block? Nope. I think he just never staggers. Well, that did fuck all damage. Oh, there we go. I'm too sleepy for this shit. God damn it. There we go. Okay. I have combo master. I can just actually start mashing the attack button and then only do the finisher on him. That might actually be a thing that we can do. Just like farm finish. God damn it, I hate this attack. I am the luckiest motherfucker alive. I didn't equip the right finisher, did I? There must be something about his AI that I'm not seeing that makes him vulnerable, like at all. Though I guess just having an onslaught of attacks and kind of just trying to survive through that while not being able to actually get in any proper damage and just kind of chip damaging your way through a fight is potentially a decision that a designer could make. I don't have the proper finisher equipped, so that certainly doesn't help. But yeah, it does not look like there's any mechanics here to make him chill the fuck down. Oh, wait a second. Is that what the gravity thing is for? Is to stagger him. I think that might be what the gravity thing is for now that I think about it. Maybe he's not weak to it. Maybe that's the way that you get him out of his invulnerable state. Yeah, that actually adds up. That makes sense. I think it's Ripple Drive. Right? Surrounding enemies. I don't think that's it. Is it Ripple Drive? No, I think it might be. I always get Ripple Drive and Stun Impact mixed up. But I think this is the one that I want. Just doesn't trigger unless there's actually enemies around. I didn't do Aroga again. You know what? I'm actually just gonna let him kill me. Because I want to make a save file where everything is set up with the proper preparations for this fight. Donald, the one time you heal me... Oh, you're going to be healing me a lot, aren't you? Because this is not Kingdom Hearts 2, so you can heal me a bunch of times in a row. Zemnis, maybe kill the healer first. Not telling you how to do your job or anything, but... I'm trying to die and you're failing. Donald's out of MP, so do your thing. Alright. Try again. Super annoying that you have to do this. Then up until Kingdom Hearts like 3. Well, Birth by Sleep. All games work like this. Where you would continue after a death and not retry. And Kingdom Hearts 3 added the prepare and retry, which was badly needed. Yeah, okay, so that's the mechanic. Is you can gravity him to stun him for a moment, and then you can get some damage off. I don't think Ripple Drive is the ability that I thought it was, though. Tink. So this is a fight which requires more or less a specific spell to be used. Now, in my game, unlike this, you don't have all your magic at all times available to you. So this is very much a you can only do this with optional bosses kind of deal. But it does make the fight a bunch easier, doesn't it? It also does deal a good amount of damage. Usually gravity doesn't work that well on bosses because obviously it's a spell that's supposed to do percentage damage. And it's coded to not work that well on bosses. This attack is still a bitch though. Did I just get MP from Tinkerbell? Oh no, I have MP Rage. Every time I get damaged, I get MP back. That's what's happening. I was so confused. I thought, Tinkerbell doesn't give MP, does she? And that's right, she does not. Okay, so you do actually kind of want to time your gravities, because during certain abilities he's not as vulnerable to it as others. Like when he's doing his dancing lightsaber thing, it does give you a bit of like tech experience, but that is the moment that you want to be doing it, is when he does those orbs of light. And I immediately do it. Oh, hold on! I managed to stagger him there without. I don't understand, man. Holy shit! I am a god. I guess when you gravity him, that. Oh no! So this is what we call a desperation move. My bosses need some of them as well. I guess when he gets hit by gravity, that just enables him to be staggered. Because I can also stagger him now without hitting him with gravity. I think. Maybe. I'm not going to survive that. Oh, I still have Tink, actually. I might. Man, Leaf Bracer is great. Are you kidding? Okay, sure. So, I don't think that this boss is very informative. Aside from, it's very frustrating when the attack speed is too high. But we already knew that because we just fought Sephiroth, which, comparatively actually, Sephiroth's starting to look a little bit more reasonable now. Because this guy just doesn't stop. I guess we did get the idea of having bosses that require specific spells, more or less, to beat them. I guess maybe I don't want to have bosses that require spells in my case, but maybe I can still have specific spells like hard-coded to work specific ways on specific bosses. But I guess I should maybe just keep that to specific damage types, right? Because I already have a system for that. And then I died. So, why did Ripple Drive not trigger? Or is it not the ability that I thought it was? I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be Ripple Drive, though. Let me just real quick. Page 1, Ripple Drive. Is that the ability I thought it was? I don't think it is. I think this is... Yeah, maybe? Gauge 1, Xemnas... Strategy. Is it... Gravity Break is what you want. How do you get that? Because I don't have that yet. Hold on. Complete Hercules Cup time trial. I don't think I want to do that right now. Yeah, so Gravity Break is what you want to have as your finisher because it has a built-in gravity, which is what he's weak to. So I do think that the elemental weakness thing is interesting, where maybe with specific elements, I think having it with specific spells also could be interesting still, though. Especially in my game, you need to be careful with that because spells are easily missed and cannot be the key to a fight. But having a spell that makes the fight a bit easier could be interesting. Now, those spells do need to be spells that are gotten elsewhere in the game, not in the same dungeon of the boss that you're fighting at that time. But let's say we have that Reaper boss, right? What if... do I have a spell that makes sense to have him be weak to? Well, we could do the Final Fantasy thing and say that we have... Like, when you heal him, he actually takes damage. We don't have a way of healing enemies, necessarily. So that doesn't actually work. But that could make sense to do, something like that. I'm thinking... I don't know. So let's get rid of all that MP that we have now, because it's kind of disgusting and ridiculous. And let's go back to my strength build, which I think used the Raven's Claw, Omega Arts, and then Raven's Claw, or Royal Crown. No, Raven's Claw I think is the other highest. No, I've got one other thing. I've got another Ifrit belt. Yep, so much less MP, much more strength. I guess I don't need to make a separate save file, because I didn't actually beat him. And let's go do the final boss gauntlet. Because those are actually story bosses, so we can see if there's any significant difference in them. Obviously, I don't have any of the story bosses available right now. I might actually have some in different save files. Where are all these save files at? These are World Terminus. So yeah, we only have Chernobog and these. This is Treasure Room at level 18. So, oh, that's my speedrun save file for practicing Jafar. Jafar is actually maybe an interesting... Well, it's a pretty bad fight. But just after Jafar, we get into Monstro, where we can maybe check out Parasite Cage. This is Captain Hook fight, practice save file. Hook might be interesting. And this is... Oh, I think this is the Riku fight. I think I made this fight... Okay, so we can definitely check out Riku after all this as well. You know, technically, we are level 100, so we might as well equip EXP 0. Because it does boost damage, I think. Right? Is that a strat to, like, do it level 100 in this one? KH1, level 100, equip, XP 0. I know XP 0 has several effects. It scales your magic damage, which can be abused with damage storage. It scales your defense enemies' attack, so you don't die in one attack. However, because I want to be able to use damage storage on a level 100 file, just because I like to obliterate some bosses. Yeah, would EXP 0 be hindering? I believe the effect of EXP 0 has diminishing gains. Ah, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So, well, let's not do that then. I thought I had an idea there. But at level 100 we can obliterate Ansem anyway, so it'll be fine. Okay, so, story bosses. Also immediately start with a ranged attack. I guess that's something we can also do with this different structure that I was talking about, right? Because we can, when we start the fight, instead of just starting phase 1, what we can do is before phase 1 we can have an entry ability for phase 1 as well. That's just the ability that he always starts the fight out with. And it can still be semi-random if we want it to be. But that gives us a little bit more control over what he does at the start of the fight. So, phase 1 entry ability. Obviously this doesn't need to just be an ability. This can be any other task that we want. If we want them to move to a certain place at the start of the fight before doing anything else, that's the thing that we can make them do as well. I just want to kind of check out what he does. So this fight in particular seems to, well, also have Donald and Goofy get in the way, obviously. They might actually just take him out, which would be really funny. But this seems to be a heavily range-based fight. Because I think that grabbing attack is the only attack where he actually moves into me. And everything else that he can do is... It's mostly this attack, to be fair. But he's also, I think, got a different attack, right? Is it just those two attacks for this first phase? I thought he also did this thing where he has, like... a area of effect type of thing. Maybe not. This seems like it actually is the only ability that he has in this fight. So it's only got those two abilities. It's an introductory fight for the sequence though, so it's fine that he doesn't have that much going for him. For these fights I mostly just want to count the amount of abilities that he has, to be honest with you. And how they obviously switch. He also has the Guardian ability, which I guess he only does in phase 2. Or maybe the other attack that I was thinking of also has a phase 2 ability. No, let's just speed you through some of your HP. I really like the idea of having Donald and Goofy save the universe, but... yeah, I might be mixing up two different fights here. Because it really seems like he's only doing this and the submit attack. Which obviously the submit attack is a little bit more than we're seeing right here, because when he hits you, he does do like a thing. Oh, that technically wasn't submit. Not gonna lie, the fact that this guy only has 2 abilities, and I set myself the goal of base enemies in my game all having at least 3 unique abilities to them, which some of them can be shared as being just this one has a fireball attack and that one has a fireball attack. But just different animations doing a like basic hit don't count as different animations, different abilities is what I mean. Kind of makes me think that maybe the 3 abilities per every enemy doesn't need to be a hard and fast rule, like the more basic ones maybe can get away with just having 2. Anyway, let's finish this fight because nothing else is happening. He also has got the Con Guardian though, which you have to be really careful when you say it, because otherwise it becomes something very different. And then we also have a Darkseid fight just sandwiched in between here, which might be interesting to take a look at, because Darkseid definitely has more abilities than this fucker. I don't know why he doesn't do, like... He only did submit once or twice. Is there something in his code that limits the amount of times he can do submit in this version of the fight? Because definitely he spams the hell out of it in his second fight. Which we're going to do here in a moment. So yeah, we've got Darkseid. He will just kind of melt away at my attacks, but let's pretend like we care. Oh, we still have Ripple Drive enabled. Huh. That's Ripple Drive, by the way. So, man, I used to be very fast at this fight. Can tell that I haven't done the speedrun since I got that sub 3 hour run at one time. 3 hour games are like not great speedrun. So yeah, he does that attack where it starts raining down these dark balls from the sky, which makes it more difficult to hit him in the face, where you deal, I think, more damage. At least that's what I've always assumed. But if you just mash the attack button, you just counter-attack all those things anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Technically you can fire spam your way through this, but I don't have fire shortcut, so I can't actually do that. Then he sits down, making his hand vulnerable, and shooting projectiles at you again. So he's actually also a fairly projectile-based boss fight, and I realize. Which makes me think, how many of the boss fights are actually projectile-based combat? Because that might be a thing to keep in mind, that bosses maybe use more than average projectiles, because it is dangerous to you without exposing them necessarily. Anyway, we have got to take this. At level 1, that's a bitch. That's the attack I was thinking about. So we've got what's essentially his version of well, that, which I'm really bad at dodging. We've still got the just punch attack. We've got the lasers from the ground attack, which effectively replaces those projectiles we had before. So it's just a replacement projectile attack, more or less. And then he still has his Cum Guardian. But that's about it. And then he's got his desperation move, obviously, but he's not going to do that yet. He moves around a little quicker too, I believe. Let's just observe him. What does he do when I don't hit him for a bit? Like, how is his attack pattern? You can definitely tell compared to... Interesting. Okay. Let me finish the thought that I was making, and then I'll move on to what's interesting here. You can definitely tell that the time between his attacks, compared to Xemnas, the fight we just did, is so large, right? And this is one of the final bosses of the game. So this is more representative of how long there should be between attacks, which is like 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a little fast. So that's like 3 seconds, let's say. But what's also interesting is that that's not just time that he's standing around, right? What seems to be happening is that after an attack, he moves to a new location, meaning that he's not entirely idle. He's doing something, but he's doing something non-dangerous, which is your opening to attack him. That mostly works because he's a heavily range-based boss, but I think that's going to be the way most boss AI work in these games. Is that they are heavily range-based, and when they want to attack you, they move in and then they move the fuck back out. So I probably need to make the AIs do that as well. So instead of waiting between attacks, I think they should move to a new safe location and then do an attack. Because yeah, the issue that I've been having is that it's just like having them stand there idly taking damage feels really bad. And then there's of course also those desperation moves, which is more than just one instance of like doing something. It's more of a sequence ability, which is good to keep in mind. But yeah, I think that's a pretty important key, is having the downtime between attacks not just be a delay where he waits and does nothing, but make that a moment where he moves from location to location. I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. Well, for this fight, I actually know exactly what he can do, because I spent like 3 hours on this fight. On the level 1 run, maybe even more. He just does this. And at some point he says that, and then he does this. These fights are not super good. Super good, period. He spawns in extra like enemies, which again on level 1 just means that you need to fly away and despawn them. At level 100 you just fucking ignore them. So yeah, that's the only real thing that he does. Is he has 2 different versions of that sword swing attack. One of which is a bitch to get in between and actually do anything, but when he does the big slashes, that's when you get an opening to attack him a little bit. And then he has the ice-spawn lasers, and now you need to just kind of like fly around attack. Which I guess kind of comes back to that Mario-esque design philosophy of taking turns, being aggressive and being vulnerable. Because ideally what you want is when those lasers show up, as a designer, when those lasers show up, the player moves around until the lasers go away again. And then you get an opportunity to get in some damage. The reality is that you can mostly just ignore them at a high enough level. And then at the very end, in the final fight against him, he just starts doing those lasers effectively non-stop. So you need to start really learning those laser patterns to get in some hits in between the lasers, instead of just waiting for them to go by. I don't think it's a well-designed fight, mind you. I think it's an epic like finale to the game, and it's very cinematic and it's very awesome and all that kind of stuff, but it's not a great like fight. I don't think. I think it's kind of poorly designed as a combat encounter for the most part, now that I'm actually like working through it. Well, I think actually that most combat encounters in Kingdom Hearts 1 are very well designed. I should point out. Because they don't rely so much on direction commands that Kingdom Hearts 2 and then the attraction flows and stuff and situational stuff that Kingdom Hearts 2 and 3 do, which make the boss fights more unique, and I like those as well in their own way. But because in Kingdom Hearts 1 the boss fights effectively are just special enemies that... Where's the last one? Oh, there we go. That don't have anything like super scripted going for them. The actual combat design of the fight needs to be more solid, and I do think it generally... Fucking somebody's dying out there, man. This sequence is the exception to that rule, because this is very much just, hey, this feels good to do. This is awesome. This is what the hell is this flash boat, right? This is where you are reminded that this, in fact, is a Final Fantasy game, because it does end with a fight against a grotesque version of God, which every Final Fantasy game does, more or less. That said, though, this does feel really good to just mindlessly mash through the face. Because level 1, that also was a bit of a difficult fight, let me tell you. Also, let me just use this, because the invincibles here are gonna be a bit annoying. So, that's a couple of them taken care of. Can you tell that I've done this at level 1, and I know the exact way to not do this and lose my will to live at this point? There we go. Also, this is a terrible room for the speedrun, because if those invincibles, or invisibles, I always get them mixed up what they're called, don't line up properly within your first gravity spam, you're so fucked. On my second run ever, I more or less nailed the timing on that to be near perfect. And now I can never gold that split again. Well, might as well actually... Well, we'll do that later. Well, actually we won't, because we'll have finished the game. At which point I'm going to do the Riku fight. Because apparently I have a save file for that, which is nice. So, yeah, this fight, the lasers are just more or less omnipresent beyond a certain point. But, oh yeah, don't look if you're always just dead in this fight, more or less. I don't think this is a bad fight, necessarily. Aside from the infinite lasers that it's going to happen in a moment here. Which I do think is a little over the top, badly designed. We might not even actually get to it. I might just blast past that because he's almost dead already. Yeah, we didn't get to the infinite laser part. Well, there we go. It's just not a very informative fight for me. I mostly cared about the Ansem 2, right? The one right after Darkside. And the first one. But mostly Ansem 2, because that would be more or less what I imagine a normal, difficult, impressive fight would be like in my game. Then again, maybe the final boss fight, I want to do something similar to this as well, in a way. I have IDs. Can I not skip this? Oh, no. I need to be able to skip this. Oh, I need to be able to skip this. Hold on. No. At least the audio. Yeah, okay. So, the audio for that is, like, highly copyright sensitive. The song that's gonna happen now. But you won't hear it, because I don't hate myself. And I would very much like this stream to remain monetized. Even if there's only like 3 people watching it. Can't skip the endgame cutscene in Kingdom Hearts 1, eh? So in the original Kingdom Hearts 1 you couldn't skip cutscenes at all. They added that in I think the HD version, not even just the Final Mix version. I think it's only in the HD version that they added in the skip scene thing. To be like on par with Kingdom Hearts 2 and the rest of the games in the collection. Did they just forget to do it for this one? Because it's not an in-engine cutscene, right? So what they might have just done is added stuff for in-engine cutscenes and entirely forgot to add it for this. Because in Kingdom Hearts 2 and all the other ones, the end game like CGI cutscenes are skippable. I feel like they just forgot. Because if they added in skip cutscene for in-engine scenes to like have parity between the different games, there's no reason for them not to add it into this one as well. It is beautifully rendered though. Gotta give them that. Look, this is what we want Kingdom Hearts 4 to look like. This is what we want Kingdom Hearts 3 to look like. And 3 didn't quite get to this amount of graphical fidelity. It kind of... I don't know. Kind of a little too plasticky in 3. And I know that this is also kind of plasticky in a way, but it's fairly close. I guess it's just a lot softer in its lighting, and it's probably not a thing that they could do in Kingdom Hearts 3 on the PS4 in real time. But God, do I hope that this is what Kingdom Hearts 4 looks like when we get back into the Disney worlds. I know that the Quadratum stuff in 4 is going to look more realistic and more like a Final Fantasy game, but man, when we get back into... And based on the one trailer that we had, where like Donald and Goofy are in the underworld, presumably, it does look like that is what Kingdom Hearts 4 is actually going to look like in the Disney side of things. And that makes me so excited. Because that's going to be gorgeous. That's going to look really good. Just a shame that on the other hand, like everything in Quadratum is going to look generic as fucking like Final Fantasy 15, but oh well. It might be worth it to look at some boss AI in some real-time Final Fantasy games as well. I don't have any downloaded right now, I don't think, but would that be an interesting thing to do? Like, we could maybe split up streams over the next, like, month or so. Between having one day, assuming that I can keep on with the streaming schedule, which I'm going to try to do. It's just been very busy, so streaming has been difficult to keep track of. And this week I could have streamed on Tuesday, admittedly. I just was playing Factorio, and I bitched about this in the Discord, but I have a dual boot, right, with Linux and Windows. Whenever I boot over to Linux and then back over to Windows, it resets my time zone back to +0, so like UK time. So I was actually keeping an eye on the clock while playing Factorio on Tuesday because I wanted to stream. And then I was like, okay, it's about time to like maybe close out the game and start preparing for the stream, because it was about like 6:15, and then I picked up my phone to check if there's anything that I needed to like check there before I start the stream, and then I saw actually it's past 8 p.m. Because my system clock was off by 2 hours. So if you know, at that point there's no real point in streaming, because usually I stream to about 9. So by the time I would have been live, it would have been like 8:30. And I could have probably gone to like 9:30 instead, but it's such a short stream. Which also brings me to, it's Friday today instead of Thursday. I'm going to be moving the Thursday stream day to Friday, if you hadn't noticed yet. Because it feels a little bit more balanced, because the way I had it initially was Monday not streaming, and then Tuesday streaming, and on Wednesday not streaming, and on Thursday streaming, and on Friday not streaming, and that seems like it is a well balanced like every other day. But then when you actually take into account there's a weekend in there as well, what actually ends up happening is that between the Tuesday and the Thursday stream there's 1 day of not streaming, and then between the Thursday and the Tuesday there's 4 days of not streaming, which is a little off balance, right? So I kind of feel the credits play footage from the PS2 version of the game. Those are just video files. Those aren't being like rendered or anything. These are just video files from the original version, because they're pixelated as hell. You can even see the compression on Alice there. Holy shit. If you look real close, you can see the compression artifacts on where Alice... It remains in the last frame. That is insane. That's really funny. Anyway, it doesn't even like go away to black at the end. It just remains in the last frame. But yeah, so that way I think what we have is there's 2 days between streams and then 3 days between streams. I think that's a little bit more balanced, and gives me a little bit more breathing room between the streams as well, because I've actually figured that, or I experienced that having them so close together while streaming is like not my main thing. It's kind of stressful as well, so I think creating more distance between it is good for me, but it's also just feels more balanced from a content perspective too. So yeah, we're going to be streaming on Tuesdays and Fridays moving forward. But yeah, what we might be able to do is like do like Tuesdays work in engine, and then Fridays like play a game for research purposes. I'm kind of I don't know. I probably should do a poll on YouTube for this. I don't want this channel to like half of it turn into being like gameplay footage. Like, this is not a let's play channel, this is a game development channel, right? That said, we are not just laying back and playing games, we're actually playing them with good calls. And if at some point I've done all the research that I want to do and I don't have any ideas as to like what to play for research, I guess I wouldn't do any more gameplay until I have other stuff that I could take a look at. But that might be an interesting split to do. You have one stream of active development and one stream of like game research per week. Yeah, I think I'm gonna like make a poll for that like tomorrow to see how the like general YouTube audience feels about that. The channel is great as it is. Change. Well, nothing would majorly change, right? It's just for the streams. one of them might turn into more of like this type of stuff, where we kind of find a balance between actively working on the game and analyzing gameplay. Can we skip this one? Nope. So, like, I'm not going to change up the fact that videos. I'm not only going to make video essays about like game design for specific games and like, or turn it into like let's playing or whatever. Even if I'm playing games like I'm doing right now, I would be doing it with like research and analysis in mind. But I do think that could be potentially interesting. You're currently running Factorio as well. Yeah, I figured I would turn it off because all the sounds in the background probably wouldn't be great for streaming. But after stream, I'm going to put it back up because I'm currently in the process of reconstructing my entire factory to use logistic bots more so than just belts. But that's taken a lot of work, man. Same problem here with my dual, but yeah, it's just, I don't know why it does that. I'm going to blame Windows, because I like blaming Windows. This also seems super pixelated compared to the rest of the game. So weird. Huh. Untroll cool mechanic and one change the poll to what create from the next dev stream. I mean, something like that, yeah. So Windows problem, I'm sure. Yeah, I would imagine so. Because the other way around, it doesn't do it, right? Like Linux has no issues when I boot over from Windows back to it. Might be something with the way that they read, like, I don't know. I legitimately don't know. Like something from the BIOS, I guess. Can't skip this one either, right? Yeah, no. We'll get back into the gameplay in a moment. It's just... these are unskippable. But right now I'm doing a lot with combat, so I'm thinking after we've done this, it might be worth looking a little bit into some of the bosses in like Kingdom Hearts 3 or Birth by Sleep even, but I don't think Birth by Sleep generally has very well made bosses. So what I'm thinking, it's a slightly different type of gameplay to look at, but it might be interesting to play a little bit of like Final Fantasy VII Remake or Rebirth. They're effectively the same gameplay style, so it will be one or the other. To see how that may be different, especially if you're looking at the boss AI. The player gameplay is very different, but I assume that the boss AI will still kind of be a good inspiration source for me. Obviously, there's something to keep in mind for the fact that it probably is going to have longer downtimes with Final Fantasy VII because it is that active time combat system, which is turn-based in real time, kind of, but not really. It's weird. So because there is that time between you actually being able to do any actual abilities, I assume that the enemy AI is going to be less aggressive to you as well in Final Fantasy VII. So it might also be interesting to take a look into Final Fantasy 15 or 16. Because those... 16 is a little bit more Devil May Cry than I'm maybe looking for. But 15, as janky as it is in a lot of ways, is probably still fairly close to what Kingdom Hearts is, if you take away the fact that the teleporting mechanic is broken. If you just ignore that and play it otherwise as a action RPG, it's probably a pretty good source of inspiration for my combat here as well. So yeah, I'm kind of thinking that Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 7 Remake, maybe a bit of 16, those are some games that we could look at over the next couple of weeks as I work on some more combat related stuff, because that's what I've been working on a lot lately and will be working on for a while longer, is spicing up my combat. Final Fantasy 15 is a cool mechanic, especially the warp attack. The warp attack is kind of too broken, though. It doesn't make for engaging combat, because with Final Fantasy 15, what ends up happening is the safest thing you can do and the most damage you can do at the same time, at least from what I've played, is running away and then teleporting back in with an attack and then running away again. And the fact that that is a strategy that you can do to just cheese fights is okay, but it shouldn't reward you with extra damage for doing that attack from further away, because that creates a incentive to constantly disengage from the actual combat. And I think that is just not a good way to do things. There's a lot of things that I do like about Final Fantasy 15. That warp attack, if you took out the warp attack, or at least rebalanced it, you don't have to take it out, because it is a really cool mechanic. But there's got to be some rebalancing for that warp attack, man, because it is just... it makes the combat tedious. Fishing system in 15 is great. Yeah, see, I did that twice. Once for the tutorial and once because I figured this is a thing that you do in this game, and then I remembered, no, actually, this is not a thing that I do in this game. It's 15. I don't like the open world aspect of 15. When the open world stops being an open world, the game gets so much more enjoyable for me. But I also was heavily underleveled in that second half of the game, because I was not doing the open world stuff. So yeah. '16 is a little... 16 is very flashy in its combat. But 16 is also super tedious when you actually look into the gameplay. I started doing a New Game Plus on Final Fantasy mode. And we'll get into this fight in a moment. I want to have my full focus on this fight. And when you start the game with all the abilities already unlocked, you actually... at some point you just have your setup of I do this ability and then this ability and then this ability and then this ability, and then I just run around until my abilities restock, and then I do it again. There's nothing much more to the combat, and there's very few combat encounters that incentivize you to change up your ability loadout. And because they are on a timer, this is a thing that I had a whole discussion about in the Discord a few months back, and also in a community post and stuff. I also considered maybe I should put my spells in my game on a timer instead of an MP system. I ended up going with a different type of MP system in the end, more closely resembling Kingdom Hearts 1 here. But the issue with the timer is that you, in the end, incentivize that same disengagement that Final Fantasy 15 has, right? But in a different way. You just drop all your abilities like a nuke, and then you run away until you can do that again. Warp in 15, bonus you by hit strike. If you run away, that resets. I mean, that might be the case, but still, I found for most, like, just normal enemy encounters, because it deals more damage based on your distance. Like, the further away you are, the more damage it deals. Which makes sense for a warp attack. On the surface. What ends up happening is that it is more worthwhile to run away and create that distance than actually engage in the combat, because it's a lot safer and you still deal disgusting amounts of damage. So that might just be a issue with the damage scaling at the low end. Maybe the damage should scale up more exponentially, like start off relatively weak and scale up more as your like combo counter increases. It's not an MMO. Abilities should be selected based on situation required, not timers. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking as well. It's because of the whole timer thing. What you end up doing, it does become kind of like you're playing World of Warcraft. I do need to get back into 15 at some point to check out some of more of the optional content, because maybe I found that the at least all of the story content that I played through wasn't very engaging, and in the ways that it was engaging, it was mostly just infuriating because the combat system just, I don't know, it's not quite there. But that's why I'm thinking maybe diving back in like a year later now, since I played it, and doing some of the more open world stuff and just like finding some optional bosses, which I'm sure there's some. I know there's one like super boss that has 1 trillion HP or something like that. But maybe I just experienced Final Fantasy 15 as the open world game, partly for my own interest, but partly also for the analysis of the combat system. Might make me appreciate the combat system a bit more. But in general, I'm not a huge fan of the way Final Fantasy 15's combat feels, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, if you didn't like 7 Remake, by the way, if it's due to the combat, 7 Rebirth is not gonna change your mind, because Rebirth is it's just the same combat. There's a couple of extra mechanics added to it, like you have abilities with teammates, which I think aren't a thing in Remake, or at least very rarely. It's a pretty integral part of the combat system, which makes it more interesting, because you're constantly trying to get ATB gauges on more than one character so that you can do their combo abilities, and some of those combo abilities get really good. So it does add in that one more element, which actually makes it worthwhile playing as the other characters as well. Whereas in 7 Remake, it is possible, I keep forgetting, but it is possible to not play as Cloud in combat encounters. But there's no reason to, because Cloud deals disgusting damage. Tifa also does, to be fair. But generally, just Cloud deals disgusting amounts of damage. Why would you play as anybody else? Because if you play as anybody else, Cloud is going to die because he's going to be a dummy NPC. Rebirth does incentivize you to actually switch up your characters mid-combat and rotate around a little bit who you play as, which I think that does improve the combat a little bit. But as a whole, it's the same combat. So if you didn't like the combat in 7 Remake, I don't think that little difference is gonna be significant. It's just, if you found it fun to begin with, 7 Rebirth improves on it. If you didn't vibe with Remake, you're not gonna vibe with Rebirth, probably. I mean, I don't mind the open world, because you're right. Like, Final Fantasy VII is one of the great games that made open worlds so popular. There's definitely games that did it before it, and on like pretty decent scales as well. But Final Fantasy VII is one of those games which is a milestone in open worlds. And on the PlayStation 1, no less. That's really impressive. The issue that I have with it isn't the fact that it's a world that's open. The issue is that it's an open world game, if that makes sense. Final Fantasy 15 is as an open world game, is a fairly generic open world game, in my opinion. Like, it's just kind of fantasy-fied what you also find in like Red Dead, or to some extent Bethesda games, Breath of the Wild, that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, all those games in and of themselves are good games. And Final Fantasy 15 can be a good game and also be that. But the open world aspect of it, to me, is super generic. And the world is just not interesting enough for me to care. That's the thing about Final Fantasy, like 7, for instance. 7 is a really good example. Final Fantasy 7 has a really interesting world. There's so much in Final Fantasy VII that you can miss. Yuffie, a whole ass party member, is missable in 15, in 7, originally. In the remakes, obviously not. Technically, Vincent is also missable, I think. There's so much content that's just missable. And if you don't get Yuffie, you don't get like a whole fucking side quest plotline of like Yuffie's home, and that kind of stuff. I don't feel that in 15. Story-driven RPGs are very difficult to keep interesting when open world. Lack of focus takes it away. That's kind of what I feel is... Well, not necessarily. It's just when you do it in the way that open world games in the modern gaming landscape are done and made. Modern open world games are very sandboxy in a lot of ways, where if we keeping at Final Fantasy VII, because it's a great example. Final Fantasy VII isn't a sandbox. It's an open world, it's not a sandbox. Walking through the world of Final Fantasy VII, which is very open-ended, there's a lot of things to explore. There's actually things to explore because they've been handcrafted and placed there and curated for you to go through and explore. And a lot of it is optional. But that's what makes the open world so open and living and breathing. Whereas a lot of the sandboxy open world games kind of steer almost into like survival game territory in some ways. Where a huge amount of the map, like the maps are massive, but they're also, especially with Final Fantasy 15, which the map in a lot of cases just feels kind of unfinished. A lot of it is procedurally generated. I'm not saying like Minecraft every time you play it is different, but like on like development level, it's procedurally generated, making it easy to make like varied landscapes and that kind of stuff. But it also means that there's like less uniqueness to it, because it is easier to just get something that is good enough with less work, which at these scales is fine, because you can't expect every tree to be manually placed, right? In a forest of that size. But you do lose something with that, I feel. And I think that's mostly what it comes down to be honest. It's partly that procedural design philosophy that a lot of these massive games have these days. I'm not saying that any procedural generation in a workflow is always bad, but it's very easy to rely on and over-rely on. So that's part of it, but I think the better distinction is the like open world versus sandbox. When I say Final Fantasy 15 feels very too much open world, you're entirely right to say, well, that's actually what Final Fantasy used to do a lot. Be very open-ended. For example, Final Fantasy 1 was a very open game. And most Final Fantasy games, up to like 9 at least, were fairly open in one way or another. 10 started to be more linear. And then 13 was just a corridor to the credits. Well, to be fair, 10 is also a corridor to the credits, but it's got a better combat system. But those games still aren't sandboxy, whereas Final Fantasy 15 feels like a sandbox to me. Like one of those survival type games almost, which I don't think that is where Final Fantasy like thrives. But Final Fantasy is also constantly about trying new things and changing things up. It is almost past Final Fantasy 5. No Final Fantasy games that are super similar. The first 4, 5 are fairly similar in a lot of ways. But starting at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10... Well, then you've got 11, which is very different, obviously. It's an MMO. 12, 13, 14 an MMO again. Then we've got 15, 16. Those are all very different games. So, far be it from me to say that Final Fantasy should always be this one thing. Because at this point, the one thing that Final Fantasy always is something that the previous game wasn't. So, the fact that they tried something open world with 15, and 15 also had a hellscape of a development period, if I understand correctly. So it makes sense. Anyway, Riku, we're going to do your boss fight analysis a little bit here. So he actually starts out not attacking you. So you can see how passive these fights actually are, right? I mean, 7 Remake is very linear, but that's... You're going to get into the decision to make the remakes a trilogy to begin with there, whether or not that was a good one. That's an entirely different discussion, which might be interesting and worth having. But the fact that Final Fantasy VII Remake itself is just the Midgar section, it does fuck with a lot of the pacing issues. Like, there's a lot of critiques of 7 Remake that I 100% agree with. Having played both a major part of the original, I never actually finished the original, and Remake and Rebirth, the pacing in 7 Remake is so slow compared to the original. The original Midgar section is like breakneck pace, which actually makes sense with the story, right? Because you have you have this mercenary who kind of just like joins in with this group of like terrorists, rebels, whatever you want to call them. And there's not really a moment to think. Like, things keep happening, and before you know it, you're out of the city. And well, now I guess we're part of this party. In Remake, you don't have that speed to like the pacing, so they need to do a lot of things to make it feel natural for Cloud to actually join up with these people, which makes things super different. And I don't think it makes them better. It does, however, very much do like a more in-depth job of world building Midgar as a location and like making it feel more alive as a result. Which I think that it does do that well. But that being said, it is like a super linear connection of hallways, because that is what Midgar is. So I guess you could make that a little bit more open. But this is the exact worry that I have about Pokemon Legends ZA, where supposedly the entire game will take place within Lumio City, which is just Paris. I don't see that being a great idea. Because I don't think that level of like openness and explorability exists within just a city. I'm very happy to be proven wrong if it ends up being a great game, but I'm not super excited for that. And I think Final Fantasy VII Remake has some of that going for it as well. Obviously, Rebirth, you're out of the city and it's much more open, and you've effectively got like 4 different separate open maps that linearly open up to you in some cases as you progress with the story, but the maps themselves are much more open. So if the linearity of Remake is what got you, which is again fair, that is mostly fixed in Rebirth, with as the counterpoint that it does become very like Assassin's Creed. Go up to a point, unlock a part of the map, you get a billion different icons on the map of things to do, and you're just like crossing things off a list. It becomes that sandbox again, which I actually think is a detrimental way to make large worlds from a game design perspective, because it just ends up feeling generic, and Rebirth ends up feeling like that generic sandbox open world game. So I hope that whatever they do for the 3rd game manages to strike a balance between having that interesting explorable world, but not make it feel like you're crossing off things in a journal, and when you open up the map you're assaulted by like 20 billion different icons. Because I think that is... I don't think that's good. I don't like that. And I know that most people do like that, because it sells so well when games do that, and I don't understand why. Anyway, this boss fight that I've been dodging. Yeah, so remember when I said this boss fight was supposed to be difficult, and when you were like kids, this boss fight felt super difficult? It's not. It's actually a super easy fight, because look at how passive this dude is. Like, there's a full like 5 to 8 seconds of him doing fuck all between attacks. Now, if I go ahead and engage him, he steps to the side and he attacks as like a counter attack. So if you just mash axe, you're gonna have a bad time. But he's also super easy to stun. Like, you can actually stun lock him super easily. If I just get into this a bit, that's the tail, and then you do... there is a rhythm to this. He sidesteps and then you do 1, 2, 1. Okay, that's the rhythm. If you do that properly, you stun lock the hell out of him, and it becomes a super easy fight. That bit is a bit more brutal, bit more difficult. Midgar was what a dopamine build-up in the original 7, where it was all building up. Yeah, I mean, it was building up to you getting dropped in the open world map. I don't know that there was actually like a bunch of anticipation for that, so I don't know if it necessarily was building up to it, but it definitely was. I mean, what it was is Midgar was the tutorial, and they made the tutorial into a full game in Remake, which I don't know if that's a thing that you want to do. So this is the rhythm that you can stun lock him in. Sometimes he does break out. I don't really have the vibe anymore for it, man. So yeah, that's the basic idea of stun locking Riku. And sometimes just putting in an Arcanum also helps. This attack also very scary as a kid. No, you just hug this wall and you're kind of good to go. Midgar was disc 1. Yeah, but that's not really a structural thing, that's more of a data thing. Because Midgar just has a bunch of unique assets. Very high quality assets as well. So once those aren't needed anymore, they swap out to disc 2 for the assets in mostly like the planes. Like you go through disc 1 so much faster than you go through disc 2. I must say I never actually played it with discs. I always played the digital version because I never played it on the PS1. But disc 2 ends with Aerith being kebabbed, right? Like essentially Rebirth ends at the end of disc 2, as I understand it. Or is that the end of disc 3? No, I'm not sure. Again, I never actually played. This does make a difference for my argument. Because if disc 2 is all the way up to Aerith dying, disc 2 is significantly longer than disc 1. Like ridiculously so. If disc 2 is just the planes, the difference might not be that big. So yeah, my idea to stun lock Riku there didn't really work that well. But the main thing being is that he's very passive. Riku is mostly a difficult fight, and that's the analysis that we're going to do here. Riku is mostly a difficult fight because he is reactive. He reacts to what you do very, very intensely. So what ends up happening is you're like 8 years old, you just press X to win, and that's worked throughout the entire game, but now Riku actually, instead of being a target for you to hit, waits for what you do and responds to that. So what you need to do is you need to bait him, which is something that you haven't had to do at any other point in the game, really. Which might be an interesting concept to keep in mind. Having to like bait the boss fights into being vulnerable by attacking him. But I don't think that's something that I really want to do. TBH. Disc 4 is the looked at the end gameplay. I remember that, but I forgot disc chapters for 2 and 3. Yeah, it might be that Aerith is the end of disc 3 then. Or it might be that Aerith is the end of disc 2 and that the rest of the main game is disc 3 and then 4 is just kind of like all the post-game stuff. And like final boss, because that has a video file in it, which is like very long. Well, actually, is Meteor a video file? Or is that in-engine? I think that's in-engine, actually, never mind. I think the only video file that plays in original Final Fantasy VII, that's not going to work. Is it? Yeah, speedrun. Huh. The only video file that plays in the original Final Fantasy VII, I think, is like that zoom out shot of Midgar. Yeah, Spider-Man with Taskmaster is a really, really good example where the game keeps track of how you play and fucks you with that. I might be able to do something with that. Not necessarily with that amount of depth, but I have those 7 different weapons, right? So maybe the final boss can have some AI dependent on the ranking or which is your most used weapon. Like, what is your default go-to weapon? And then I would probably keep track of that in terms of the amount of damage that you've dealt with each weapon. Or just each weapon having like a score associated with it, because I also have a shield that doesn't technically take damage or deal damage that much, so that would never be that good. But if you use it all up, maybe it actually wouldn't be that difficult to keep track of. It's just the programming of the AI is going to go insane. But it would be pretty interesting to do. Yeah, if I keep track of a score of every weapon, which is effectively, again, just the amount of damage that you've dealt with each weapon for the damaging weapons, I guess, and then the amount of damage that you've blocked for the shield, maybe. If you have the shield as your most used weapon, maybe the boss uses more attacks that are unblockable from the shield or whatever. All these weapons should have a relationship where one is strong against the other. So if I can keep track of which weapon is the most used by the player, I can have the final boss, which also has access to all these weapons, use the opposite of that a larger percentage of the time. But I also kind of was just thinking that it would switch its weapons every so often. So every, let's say, 90 seconds, it would switch to a weapon that would be the quote-unquote super effective weapon against you. That's kind of how I had that in mind. More like in-the-moment reactive. But I can still have it start out with the weapon that it thinks is gonna screw you the most. Yeah, the way that Spider-Man does it, no doubt, is much more complex as well, because the combat in Spider-Man is actually remarkably complex in the amount of moves that you have and the way that you like all the things that I would need to keep track of in order to make like an educated guess at what your playstyle is. It's a little bit more complicated than just, hey, you have 6 different options to go through and they all have a number associated with them, and higher number got brr. The way that Insomniac, it's Insomniac, right? I think so. Put that together is quite insane. Again, yeah, especially for not even the final boss of the game or anything, which it would make sense to do that for. Love Final Fantasy 8 also. Remember when I finished 7 and then went to the store to go to the magazine to demo of Final Fantasy 8? I've never actually played 8 for more than like an hour. There's a couple of Final Fantasy games that I've never really gotten into. Never really got into 5, 8, 12. All the rest I've played at least halfway through. 13 maybe not quite halfway through yet, but I'm in the process of doing so. Anyway, let's go back to the title screen because I also want to do Jafar. But yeah, I don't know. Final Fantasy X is and will probably forever remain my favorite. 16, honestly, is pretty close though. I like 16 a lot. There we go. But nothing is going to beat Final Fantasy X. It's just... It's an actual turn-based combat, not ATB bullshit. Okay, so, Jafar. Why is this a bad boss fight? You will see in a moment. He goes away after a couple of hits, just like a revenge value type of system. Then he goes there, and then he moves. And this time we got lucky, but very often he just moves to a place where you physically can't get to him. If this were Kingdom Hearts 2, wouldn't be that big of an issue because your like maneuverability is a lot better. But what the fuck am I supposed to do here, right? Because he's also highly resistant to all magic. So this is a really good example of what not to do. That's the best I can do, is climbing up on there and just getting one combo off. To tell him to move again, essentially. There is a way to one-cycle him. But Jafar is honestly part of the reason that I don't feel like getting much deeper into the Kingdom Hearts 1 speedrun than I already have. Because he's a pain in the ass. He's the embodiment of RNGesus. So this is kind of the way that I fight Jafar. Isn't this fun? Aren't we all having a grand old time? This is tedious. This is annoying. This is bad. Nobody likes this. Least of all me. I'm also quite low leveled because this is the speedrun save file, so I'm only level 18. You're supposed to be like level 20 something at this point in the game. Okay, so there we go. So you think, okay, that's one fight, but it's Jafar. We can see where this is going, right? You're going to fight Genie Jafar, surely. This is Disney. We know how this happens. So surely Genie Jafar is actually a good fight, right? Right? Surely this was just a half-baked, slapped-together piece of shit fight as the prelude to the real fight. And this is going to be super awesome. Well, sorry to disappoint, but the Genie Jafar fight is this. It's the fucking Iago boss fight. Where once again, fucking gravity is the most dangerous thing here. Because sometimes Iago flies to places where you can't get to him. And sometimes this happens, which is kind of funny. So yeah, it's a matter of getting him low in HP as quickly as possible before you actually get to a place where you can't hit him anymore. Isn't this great? Oh, there we go. Isn't this just great boss design? Oh, so good. It's so fun how I can't hit him. Like, even if I tried, I can't hit him. There is a thing where you can hit Jafar himself with specifically Blizzard magic. When... Oh, okay, there we go. So actually, that was a pretty decent Jafar fight. So yeah, sometimes when Iago goes out of range, you can focus on Jafar by hitting with Blizzard magic. Through the like invisible wall. So there is a little something to it, but it's not a good fight. It's not a good fight at all. Oh, this is also fun. This is actually faster to complete if you die. But I've never managed it. Because in beginner mode, it's really difficult to die here. I think this slows you down. I think that's the thing that you need to do, but I don't know, man. Never really looked up the proper strats to probably die here. Don't take the HP orbs. Yeah, so I almost did it there. I almost died, but you can skip this entire last section if you die soon enough. And dying just skips you to that cutscene anyway. It's only like a 10-second save or something like that. It's one of those things where it's kind of weird. So that only leaves one real boss fight to do at this point. And that is Captain Hook. Which actually is a halfway interesting fight, maybe, I think. So I still do want to give that a look, because I think we have, yeah, Ship Cabin. Surely that's a save file that I made to practice Hook. No! This is a save file that I made to practice Anti-Sora. Well, that's actually still an interesting fight, because one of the boss fights in my game is just a inverse version of the player. So maybe this can be informative. The battle arena is ass. because you're constantly hitting your keyblade on the geometry of the actual level. But let's just try to see what he does in his behavior. So he's actually fairly aggressive. He's a lot more aggressive than a lot of other fights that we've seen so far, including Riku. Because again, Riku is a very reactive type of fight. This guy just kind of constantly is attacking, but he does have those little pauses between each attack. So in this case, the strategy actually is to remain close enough that you need to like dodge or block him. And he's got this attack as well. And then he's got an opening for you to do a combo, but not a full combo. Well, in his final phase, he disappears when you do a full combo. And I guess this whole clone type of deal, that's what I was talking about. So the whole clone type of deal might be an interesting thing to do. Not for my own shadow version of a boss fight. Maybe for a different boss fight, or maybe for just a... Well, normal enemy, it's maybe a little bit too complex of a behavior to have that happen. But for a different boss fight, or maybe a mini boss fight, that might work fairly well. I'm actually thinking that making copies like that would probably thematically work best with like a ghostly type of boss fight. So the Reaper that I have right now might actually be a fight where I want to do this. And I'm thinking that the Reaper fight that I have, that's the entire fight against Anti-Sora. He's not that interesting. The whole reason that Anti-Sora has a save file is because there's a specific technique where you can like, low to the ground air combo and stun lock him. But I never got the hang of it, and I respect myself too much to get good at it. So the Reaper boss fight has this system where he always moves in this circle over this spline, right? I'm thinking about getting rid of that as well, and just making them able to freely move around. The issue is that he is technically a flying character, and Unreal doesn't have three-dimensional navigation coming with it. And the plugins that I found that do it don't work with level streaming. And my entire game is set up to load levels through level streaming instead of opening them as like different levels. So what I probably would need to do is I would need to use the 2D nav mesh. I think that's a thing that I can do. If I just get the 2D nav mesh, get a point that it can navigate to within that, that will... that will let me still use the... no, it won't, maybe. What I needed to do is I just needed to be able to float above and use the nav mesh below it to navigate around. I'm sure that that's doable. Right, in the worst case scenario, what we do... No, that actually doesn't work because the... I was going to say, in the worst case scenario, what we do is we set the root component to just be below the actual character. But the root component is the collision. So that's not going to... Then again, I don't really use the collision for this guy to begin with. Like, actually, I don't think. So maybe what we could do is if we just set this to be super small, we can make this navigate. Yeah, so if this just navigates and this floats above that, that effectively is flying navigation using the ground nav mesh. That may work. I gotta test this real quick. But I think that may work. It may also not. But if that works, I guess that's a good hacky way to do it for now. I'm gonna probably do a lot of the boss AI rework over the weekend. I also redid the platforming section. Remember the very pink big box that I have? Yeah, it's been entirely reworked into something that still slightly resembles the rough shape of what it used to be, but it is very much also quite different now, and in my opinion, generally it's so much better than it used to be now. But this is where I ran into, like, okay, this last room, I had these IDs that I used. We have these trapdoor things, and then in here I have the trapdoors with these things that come out of the walls. So you need to time the trapdoors with the timing of these objects, and then here we only have these objects, but they come from the left and from the right, and it just starts to feel a little bit stale, right? And I got to this final room that I need to put stuff in to get up here, which again does these pusher things, and I just didn't really have any more mechanics to work with. There were just I use everything that I had. Moving platforms, that's the only other thing that I have. So I figured, you know, I just need more movement mechanics to actually make fun platforming with. But yeah, so this now is very, very different. Again, I would argue a improvement. Let's... You guys, for the most part, I don't think have seen the new art assets either, have you? Yeah, so there's a bunch of new art assets. What? Oh yeah, that's a little annoying thing in editor. When the levels aren't technically visible, they can't be streamed in. Doesn't happen with packaging the game, obviously, but it's just when the editor doesn't have them visible, they're just not loaded, so they can't be loaded in. So it's a bit bananas, to be honest. I just need to get to a save point to get to there. And then, oh no, oh yeah, this also looks a little different now, doesn't it? So, looking all spooky and stuff. Some of this is still getting improved as well, but we're getting there. Can I just squeeze past this? Just about no. Well, in that case, I'm the developer. Move. Oh yeah, I also made... Oh, what the hell? Also made this temporary intro cutscene for this fight, and a defeat cutscene for when you beat the fight. Which actually I can skip, because I implemented skip scene. Okay. where is the boss? What happened to the boss? I'm just gonna... Okay, so that might be as a result of what we did here. So let's revert these back to... I might have fucked up a little. Because I don't remember what the values for these were. Well, we'll figure it out. That seems about right. It might also be the fact that we are in the wrong part of the state tree here. These two... yeah. Should never fix two things at once, because now I don't know what the... oh, and I don't have a convenient way of rechecking every single... okay, we might not try this tonight. This might be a thing that I just figure out over the weekend. Maybe I get a great ID tomorrow for the notification that isn't as hacky or whatever. But yeah, I think I'm gonna get rid of the circular movement because it's only giving me fucking headaches, man. And it actually just makes the fight a bit more stale than it should be, probably. So might be, even though it took me a lot of time and effort to write that code in the first place and then rewrite it for state trees, I think it might be for the best to get rid of it. Oh, he's just... oh, I know what's happening. Okay, let's Control Z our way through all this. Hello? Why are you not Control Zing? Anyway, the issue is that this thing doesn't start as active. Which it should, because it is a boss fight. But then still, it behaved differently, but that's probably the state tree. Yeah, I'm gonna, at some point, learn to finish my sentences. I'm gonna change this back to what we just had, where we had like a tiny capsule for just him. And then have him above that. Because again, it's hacky, but it might work. I'm also going to Google if anybody else has had issues with, or solutions, surrounding floating character movement. Doesn't even need to be flying, it just needs to be floating. Like, you can just use the ground plane's nav mesh. It just needs to not actually be walking on the ground. So I effectively just want him to use the nav mesh and then say, okay, this is where the nav mesh is. I'm going to be somewhere between 500 and 800 units above that point. That doesn't seem unreasonable, right? That seems like it should be doable. To be fair, this seems promising because this just kind of... it just kind of works, right? He's high up there. The only thing that I need to check out now is whether or not I can actually hit the fucker. And it hits him based on the bottom capsule. And it also magnetizes me toward that, which is fixable. Because I think I also have the mole boss set up in a way where it doesn't actually use the collision for the capsule component, maybe. Yeah, let's not bother with fixing that. So yeah, I'm gonna just give it a think. I'm gonna try to figure out what I'm gonna do regarding his movement, because right now I'm not 100% sure what I want to do with it. But this has been a informative stream, especially the first half before we started ranting about Final Fantasy VII. Specifically the structure of his AI. The fact that I do need to start structuring his AI less like this and more like this. Each one of these being one like this as a whole. But that will give me more flexibility and more possibility to do fun stuff with different phases being scripted, being programmed to behave significantly differently, aside from a couple of values that get tweaked. So that's been it. I'll be back on Tuesday, hopefully this time for real. If nothing else happens again, who fucking knows at this point. And we'll actually be doing some development on something. I don't know what yet, but on something. So thank you all, and I'll be back later. Bye.